afternoon, everyone. My name is Shontelle Ramsay. I'm a policy analyst here at the Council of State Governments. And today, my colleague Melissa and I will be discussing expanding first response, the catalyst for change. Our time today, we're going to discuss with you all the organizational overview and how we work, defining community response, expanding the first response toolkit and the assessment tool. We'll talk about our learning communities, our data collaborative, and our elected leaders council. Finally, we'll talk about our commission recommendations.
Hello, everyone. It is really wonderful to be here with all of you today for this conversation. As Shontelle said, my name is Melissa McKee. I'm a policy analyst here at the Council of State Governments Justice Center. The CSG Justice Center is a national nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that combines the power of a membership organization serving state officials in all three branches of the government with policy and research expertise to develop strategies that increase public safety and strengthen communities. To give you an idea of how we work, we bring people together. With our singular ability to reach federal, state, and local leaders from all three branches of the government, we gather people from both sides of the aisle and across the country to foster collaboration. We drive the criminal justice field forward with original research. Our in-depth data analysis, coupled with extensive interviews of people on the front lines of the criminal justice system, inform improvements and spur our national initiatives. We build momentum for policy change. We synthesize and contextualize data to help policymakers enact and implement major reforms that address criminal justice challenges, many of which intersect with other systems such as health, education, and housing. And we provide expert assistance. Our unrivaled on-the-ground training and assistance helps states and local agencies translate the latest research into policy and practice. And we do all of this with three primary goals: to break the cycle of incarceration, to advance health, opportunity, and equity for all people, and to use data to improve safety and justice. The Council of State Governments Justice Center is committed to advancing racial equity both internally and externally. We support efforts to dismantle systemic inequities by providing rigorous and high-quality research and analysis to decision makers and helping stakeholders navigate the critical and oftentimes uncomfortable issues that the data reveal. Beyond empirical data, we rely on stakeholder engagement and other measures to advance equity, provide guidance and technical assistance, and improve outcomes across all touch points of the justice, behavioral health, crisis response, and re-entry systems.
So first off, I'd like to acknowledge that 2020 was definitely a heavy year for everyone. The coronavirus pandemic swept the globe, killing more than 1.7 million people. Protests stemming from several killings of unarmed Black Americans, including Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, that all erupted throughout the country. Racial injustices, health inequities, community inequities were exacerbated for everyone. Sadly, the killings of innocent Black Americans continue to this day. We heard and we saw all of that unfolding right before us. We acted and helped communities build out a continuum of first response options to reach people experiencing mental health illnesses, substance use, homelessness, and nonviolent social disruptions. Our efforts ensured communities had more information, data, and support to build out their first response options that enhances the dignity, safety, and wellness of communities. We developed tools, provided resources, and we're giving technical assistance that aids in the alternatives to policing and the expansion of first response. Next slide, please. We all know collaboration with community members and local providers is essential to developing any program. The toolkit goes through various types of calls and services that would be addressed by the program, and it guides the program on the structure of the program, potentially what location should their program operate out of. Also, it assesses the need for staffing and training. Lastly, we analyze how the program can contribute to reducing systemic biases and barriers. Next slide, please. So we're going to break down now what a community response model is. Ultimately, a community responder program operates with the vision of helping communities resolve problems internally without the justice system. These trained individuals consist of social workers, peers, EMT, and other professionals, and they work together to handle crisis situations that do not immediately threaten public safety. Their approach is of trauma-informed care. They utilize de-escalation techniques, and they also connect members of the community to much-needed resources. The team focuses on person-centered care. This is essential for meeting individuals where they are at. Next slide, please. Expanding our first response assessment tool. CSG launched this web-based resource back in 2020. It's designed to help communities to determine where they are in planning, implementation, and sustaining a community responder program. You can do this all on this website in less than 15 minutes. The tool gives users the choice to take one of 5 assessments to determine either their readiness for the program, how well their implementation is going, and whether or not they have the tools and the resources needed to sustain their program operations. A summary of the responses is provided at the end of the assessment. Several tips and resources may be provided to assist communities in reaching sustainable implementation of their program. Direct assistance, peer learning opportunities, and online publications are just a few of the available resources. Next, please. Unlocking Democracy is our partnership with the Center for Policing Equity. Just a few words on what CPE is. CPE measures biases in policing. CPE also provides leaders with data, stories, and relationships to facilitate change that's bold and innovative. Through our partnership with CPE, we are excited to offer our learning communities, our data collaborative, and our elected leaders council. These 3 resources offer communities the keys to unlocking democracy. Next slide, please. So with our learning communities, there was a selection process back in the summer of 2022 for our learning communities. Communities typically consist of 4 to 6 people who represent the core sectors necessary to implement an alternative response within the community. The general makeup of the teams consisted of individuals from fire, law enforcement, or emergency medical services, as well as a representative that will be implementing the alternative intervention. So for example, a social worker or a behavioral health counselor. And for our schools, it was someone within the education department and also a data coordinator. Our learning communities are geared towards policing alternatives in 4 critical areas, including traffic safety. So for example, minor traffic stops, school safety, including student discipline, truancy, and school safety officers, school resource officers, crisis systems, community responders, crisis stabilization centers, crisis call centers, and lastly, violence intervention, including de-escalation, credible messengers, and trauma counseling. We started our learning communities back in November of 2022, and now we are in the process of wrapping up our final learning community sessions. Right now, I'd like to take a moment to highlight one of our members that participated in the learning communities. We have worked with various participants who are in different stages of their work, from exploration, planning, and some that are already fully implemented. Right now, I'd like to highlight CRESS. CRESS is located in Amherst, Massachusetts, and it stands for Community Responders for Equity, Safety, and Service. They are a separate division from their police department. Our program manager, Ann Larson, who's pictured here, had the pleasure of conducting a site visit earlier this year in March to see calls for service in action. This opportunity was a great peer learning experience for her and everyone else. CREST is an unarmed, person-centered, trauma-informed, anti-racist public safety agency that provides community safety services in situations that don't involve violence or a serious crime. Their approach is an alternative to calls that might otherwise require a response from the police department. CREST takes pride in their work and builds bridges to care to treatment for people within the community. It's because of our learning communities that we have stronger community relationships. Next slide, please. The goals for our learning communities. Our goals include to help each learning community implement emerging best practices and document the processes and the outcomes of their efforts in the field. Our participants have benefited from peer-to-peer learning support and connections, guidance from subject matter experts, and practical guidance and troubleshooting through technical assistance efforts that we offer on a monthly basis. Next slide, please. We all know data is a key component to programming. It helps with funding. It helps tell a story. You're able to track and measure your outcomes all through data. Our data collaborative sessions was held alongside our learning communities, and we had various different topics that we focused on throughout our sessions. We focused on the introduction to data, collecting and using data to inform program developments. We helped our participants by providing a logic model template in where we provided real life examples of actions, steps, and outcomes, and we assisted our participants in building out their logic models. Lastly, mapping logic models to metrics. We showed them how to use how the logic model guides program implementation and to meet the needs of the community. Finally, in our last session, we connected our learning community participants to research evaluators within the community.
Thank you, Shontelle. In March of this year, the Council of State Governments Justice Center, in partnership with the Center for Policing Equity, launched the Unlocking Democracy Elected Leaders Council, a peer-to-peer learning community for elected officials and their staff members nationwide who are dedicated to spearheading innovative efforts to take actionable steps toward true public safety reform. Understanding the critical role that local officials play in supporting alternative response models, the purpose of the Elected Leaders Council is to engage local elected leaders to develop strategies to sustain alternatives to policing around traffic, school-based diversion, crisis systems, and violence intervention. To inform and champion elected leaders from the learning community sites and around the country on local initiative programming, data, and policy to allow them to better champion these initiatives. To unify the voices of elected leaders to promote alternatives to policing and community-led initiatives as significant, legitimate, and professional alternatives within our public safety systems. To connect local elected leaders as community champions to amplify and support each other's efforts and share learnings in the form of both successes and challenges. And to pass the mic to informed voices around the table so that we have the opportunity to learn from urban and rural locales, red states and blue, all across the spectrum of planning, development, and implementation to help shape strategies. To help foster a supportive environment that allows community responder programs to flourish and begin building an evidence base and track record of long-term effective operations, the Council of State Governments Justice Center launched the first ever national Expanding First Response Commission in March of 2023. This is an exciting time as jurisdictions expand and adapt these innovations. However, experience teaches us that promising innovations can become derailed by negative press, isolated bad incidents, unexpected negative consequences, or simply when political will and attention shift. In addition, there remains significant uncertainty about the ability of these models to scale to meet the need for mobile crisis response in coordination with existing public safety and crisis systems. Best practices to ensure effective and equitable outcomes, and strategies to build sustained political and funding support at the national level. So members of the Expanding First Response Commission represent a cross-section of demographics, expertise, and experiences, and have the opportunity to shape the conversation of and offer recommendations for the advancement of community responder programs nationwide. The Commission brings together national leaders with expertise in community responder programs, crisis systems, and public safety systems to convene over the course of 6 months to outline a national policy framework focused on the core question: what is needed to help community responder programs become an integral part of the public health and safety systems in communities across the country? Expanding First Response Commission members are committed to listening deeply, working collaboratively with others, and cultivating recommendations based on trust, justice, and equity. In doing so, Commission members are actively contributing to a collective environment and advising on takeaways that will be used widely to continue to build state and federal support for community responder programs nationwide. The purpose and the impact of the Commission is to engage national leaders and policymakers to develop a strategy to sustain community responder models and build best practices for how they can operate as strong parts of comprehensive crisis and safety systems. To unify the voices of national experts, to promote community responders as part of an effective crisis system and as significant, legitimate, and professional alternative first responders within these systems. To elevate informed voices to shape the recommendations of the commissions, to make space for community responder models as vehicles for national innovation in public safety and crisis systems. The Expanding First Response Commission is focusing on and developing recommendations for topics such as dispatch, data collection and evaluation, workforce and staffing, sustainable funding, and how to build community awareness and satisfaction for community responder programs. Commission members will craft a vision and a set of recommendations outlining a roadmap for how policymakers at the federal, state, and local levels can help to ensure that community responder programs are solidified as an effective component of public health and safety systems. This will include a report with key recommendations, strategies for how to disseminate those recommendations to relevant audiences, and briefings to congressional members. The Expanding First Response Commission report will contain recommendations related to call types and dispatch procedures and policies, how data can be used to drive decision-making in integration, professional identity, scale, and regulatory oversight and quality of community responder programs. The skills, resources, training, and authority needed for effective community response. How to attract talent, incentivize hiring, and retain a community responder workforce. And how to demonstrate the economic functionality of community responder programs. So we've talked about where we've been and where we're currently working in the expansion of first response. Now, let's turn our attention towards where we are heading. Our final commission meeting will take place in July, at which point we will combine all of the information gathered into a report with key recommendations. We are heading into the second year of our partnership with the Center for Policing Equity. The Elected Leaders Council will begin its second year of programming in September. This year, we will be focusing on topics such as data transparency, traffic safety and redesign, and juvenile interrogations. We will also be launching applications for a second cohort of learning communities at that time. In November, we will engage a new group of local communities across the country in a series of learning communities focused on crisis systems, community violence intervention, community responders on college campuses, and youth diversion efforts to help these communities build relationships in the field, collect and use data to inform program development and capacity, connect to program evaluators, and ultimately work toward the integration of alternative programs into the public safety landscape. So in other words, stay tuned. Thank you all so much for your time today, and thank you for the work that you do every day to make our community safer for all people.